Well, hi. Today is Monday, October 13th, 2025. I'm Todd Studer, and this is Morning Coffee. We are going to have a little bit of rain this week, and then temps cooling back into normal, but it should be warmer than normal. Were you outside yesterday at all? Wow, it was a warm day yesterday. But eventually, fall will get here. That's just how it works. Sometimes it's a little bit late and just likes to make an entrance. So that's what's going on. You have heard me talk many times about what has happened in the media and how many places have forgotten what it was that they used to do and how they used to be able to serve the community. But there's somebody out there that I have been watching for a while, and she does a really good job in our area. And that is Katrina Markel from Channel 3 in Omaha, and she covers all of Southwest Iowa. If you see Katrina Markel someplace, everybody's excited because they know there's going to be a great story coming up. And she was very gracious to come on and do an interview with me, and we're going to bring you that. We had a little bit of technical difficulty of getting it done the usual way, so I pivoted and we recorded on Zoom, so it's going to have a little bit of a different look to it than what you're used to, but still great interview. We learn about Katrina's background, about her how she was originally from Southwest Iowa and her ties here, some about her career. Learned a lot that I didn't know that she had done. So all of that is coming up today. Katrina Markel from Channel 3 will be our guest today on Morning Coffee. You know, since 1870, Avela Bank has been providing Iowans with high-quality financial products and services to fit their needs. Whether you need a loan, would like to start a new business account, saving money for a trip, or maybe just want to open a personal checking account, Avela's qualified bankers can help you with all of that and more. Visit avela.bank to learn more. There is a great spot. It's laid back atmosphere, great food, even better company. It's the Mile Away in Council Bluffs. Now they're closed today. They are closed on Mondays. That's the one day that they all take off and spend at home with their families. But they're going to be open once again tomorrow. This family-run bar and grill is your go-to for mouth-watering wings, unbeatable weekly specials, and a welcoming atmosphere that feels like home. It's one of my favorite places to watch a Hawkeye game. And they are located on Old Lincoln Highway, just north of Council Bluffs. It's the perfect place to relax and enjoy good times. Want to know all about the latest going on at the Mile Away? Best way to do that is to follow them on Facebook. The Mile Away, where great food and great people come together. And speaking of great food, there is a gentleman, Bryce Taylor, with GLI Insurance Group in Crescent. He started a page called the Council Bluffs Food Lovers, and folks leave reviews from some of the restaurants that they've been to. Quite often, it's positive, but not always. they're pretty honest on there. If they had a bad meal, they're going to let you know about it. But Bryce and I go out periodically, and we do a restaurant highlight. So we go and either have breakfast or lunch someplace in the area and kind of talk about some of the different foods that we are having. Our last one, we were at Third Base in Council Bluffs, and we'll have another one coming up very, very soon, and I'm looking forward to those. It's always a ton of fun when we can get together and talk some football. Bryce is an Iowa State guy. I'm an Iowa fan, and we will Iowa State, of course, losing last week. Iowa got the win over Wisconsin. How about that? Now they got Penn State coming into town that is now without their coach. So we'll see what happens this coming Saturday. But GLI Insurance Group, a local and family-owned independent insurance group, it's been helping people find the best possible plan for them for over a decade. So give Bryce a chance and just have him give a look at your insurance and see what he can do for you. And look for that next restaurant highlight that we'll have for you here on the show. I always love it when I have an opportunity to turn the tables on someone who makes a living as an interviewer, and now here she is as an interviewee, Katrina Markel, Channel 3. Thank you so much for your time. It's great to see you. Also great to talk to you last week at the Heartland Developers Conference. You did a great job emceeing there, by the way.
Oh, thanks. That was fun. It was pretty easy lift in a lot of ways. They didn't, I got to be there and announce a few speakers, and then I just got to hang out and meet some people. And I did, as you know, I did some stories while I was there. So, but again, it was an easy way to do a couple of of stories and just a different group of people. So I liked that experience.
That particular event, my number one goal was not being exposed as the new village idiot before I got out of there, because it was a conference full of really smart people.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been to tech conferences before, but as Dalla Alfonso, the CEO of AIM, said there was no fluffy stuff at this conference. So I walked into a few of the breakout sessions, and they were like deep into
Yeah.
coding conversations. It wasn't like when I've been to tech conferences and they're talking about marketing, or even I've been to some video game conferences and I can kind of follow some of the speakers and what they're talking about. But no, this was definitely hardcore tech people for sure.
Tell me a little bit about your background. I know that home base is Glenwood, right? That's where you grew up.
Yeah, I mean, actually lived in Silver City until I was 7, and then we moved to Glenwood. And I transferred to AL. We continued living in Glenwood, but I transferred to AL starting my sophomore year of high school. Open enrollment's pretty common now. It was less so then. And so I graduated from AL, and then I was always trying to escape Southwest Iowa. So I went to NYU originally to study theater because it made sense I got a good scholarship, strangely, and it made sense to go to New York to study theater. And then while I was there, I became more interested. I was hanging out with a lot of the filmmakers. I became more interested in filmmaking and directing. And so eventually I thought, well, maybe I want to go to film school. And I applied. I think I was a finalist for one program that I wanted to go to, but I didn't get in. And I thought, well, and I shouldn't have. I wasn't ready at that point to, get an MFA in filmmaking at, UCLA. That's a super competitive. Those are all super competitive programs. So I went and decided to teach myself to be a filmmaker by making a film. So I came back to Glenwood and actually did a documentary on their homecoming. Glenwood has a very over the top
Yes, they
home,
do.
and even more so, certainly more so 25, 27 years ago, and then even compared to maybe the 70s wasn't quite as extensive, or when I was growing up in the 80s it was even more extensive. And so anyway, I made it. It took me forever. I got some grant money. I didn't know what I was doing. I just was sort of teaching myself as I was going along, and I made that documentary. But I also, somewhere in that process of doing that and directing some theater, realized that I was maybe a better nonfiction storyteller. And so then I applied to grad school again, and I went to the journalism program at NYU, which was very focused on making documentaries at the time. It still is, but I think it's bigger than it was at the time. So they have a lot more kind of different journalism tracks you can be on. But I was really focused on doing long form journalism. So whether that would have been documentary making, or I did an internship with John Stossel at ABC, and he was on 2020 at the time. So that kind of long form magazine style or documentary style was where I thought my career was going to go. Um, so what I'm doing now, some of the same skills apply, but it wasn't like, that's not, there are journalism programs that are training people specifically to go into like local daily news and work your way up the ladder and do these 2-minute daily news stories, and that's not what I was focused on. um I should probably try to summarize this a little bit. So my eventual husband, and he's since passed away, but he made video games, and so we moved around a lot for his career. So it kind of set some of my journalism career aside. For a while, we lived in LA. I did a little bit there. Then we moved up to the San Francisco Bay Area. And I started working a little bit more around the tech industry, actually, but still media or journalism adjacent, but it wasn't journalism. And we lived in Scotland for a year and we moved back to the Bay Area and then we lived in India for a year. And at some point, 20 years had gone by and um, Paul, my late husband, had been working in Mumbai, India. So that's Bombay. Some people still know it more as Bombay, but it's officially Mumbai now. And so we spent a year there, but when that job didn't really work out, then we moved back and really didn't have anywhere to go. So we moved into my childhood home in Glenwood and ended up getting jobs in the Omaha area. And I really didn't think at this point, it had been so long since I'd been in news full time. And again, always kind of doing things adjacent to news, but not quite news. I didn't think I'd get back into full time news. So I took a corporate marketing job and I wrote for Omaha Magazine on the side and I did some newspaper writing on the side. And then the pandemic, I got laid off from my marketing job. And I remember telling some people that I went to church with that, like, look, and at this point, my husband had passed away too. But I thought, if I get laid off because of the pandemic, first of all, I'll be fine. But also, I'm just going to do something that I really want to do. And so then I started just freelancing intensely for mostly for Omaha Magazine. And eventually, a few months later, and I wrote a little bit for what it was the Papillion Times. I'm getting very granular with this, but so I did a little newspaper writing, a little magazine writing, and was just getting by like, through the height of the pandemic. And a job opened up at KMTV, and it was the digital manager job. So all of the stuff that I'd done up until that point, the marketing work, some of the more entrepreneurial things, tech industry, it all kind of came together and made sense to be the digital manager at KMTV. But then a few years ago, the content strategy changed for Scripps and the way they handled digital changed. And so then I moved over to being an on-camera reporter and I was 48, so that is not a typical career path for an on-camera reporter. I almost went backwards from management into being an on-camera reporter. And it's probably what I should have been doing all along, but life just didn't kind of take me in that direction. But I kind of knew immediately when that opportunity came up. It was probably one of the first times in my life that I didn't have imposter syndrome. Where I
Yeah,
was
I
like, yeah,
know
I could
nothing
do
about
that.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was like, yeah, I could do that. I'll be, I have the skills to do that. But it was still, the equipment has changed. I had to relearn how to edit. I had to relearn how to shoot. I'm still learning how to use my camera, really. So
Well, yeah, it does change, but at the same time, there's a theme that goes through in any the different types of editing software. I can see commonalities from what I'm doing now, working in a video editor, back when I had a razor knife and a grease pen, actually splicing reel to reel together to make a commercial from a bunch of kids that were recorded on cassette. So there's a theme there, and those skills do carry over even though the technology changes.
yeah. Well, and I think I told you I hung out with a lot of film students in school too. So now I find myself we're using Final Cut Pro. That doesn't necessarily matter. But I find myself explaining some of the digital terminology and where it comes from because I'm like, no, back in my day, there was a bin. Like you weren't just putting files in some folder and it's just called a bin randomly. Like there was literally a bin where you hung film.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean this concept still apply, right? And but reporting daily news is pretty different than either making a long form documentary over a long period of time or writing a magazine article that's 1,200 words or more in some cases. Trying to tell a story in 2 minutes and do it every day on a different topic is it's different. I mean, the skills do cross over, but it is different. You have to shift gears a
I
little bit.
think that you are uniquely qualified to talk about the differences between city living and more rural existence because and I've talked about many times on the show and I've talked with clients too that the personal connection is more important in a more rural setting. Not that it's not important in a city setting, but it's different skill sets that you have to bring to your job in order to connect with people when you're talking with folks in a small town. And you deal with folks all across Southwest Iowa. So you need to be able to make that connection with people. And I know that you have, because I talk to people and they know who you are and they're happy, they're thrilled when you come out to see them. So you have effectively been able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you're right. I think we've talked about that a little bit here, especially for folks that don't know. KMTV are were owned by Scripps, and Scripps, some of the Scripps stations have gone to this neighborhood news model. So people have a neighborhood beat instead of doing a subject matter beat or being a general assignment reporter where you're covering anything. I'm kind of a general assignment reporter, but I am specifically assigned to Southwest Iowa. And occasionally I'll do something else, but usually, 90+% of the time I'm in Southwest Iowa. I do think that my reporting is based a lot of times on building relationships with people. And I had a leg up when I started, just because I'm from Glenwood, and I did go to school in Council Bluffs. So I know people at least in that corner of Southwest Iowa, and it gave me somewhere to start because I had those lifelong relationships with people. But I think over time it's been about building relationships kind of as I go in Southwest Iowa. And it helps. I think it helps because sometimes even local news, we get so focused on what's happening in the cities that people in small towns aren't used to necessarily getting the television coverage. And so when people know that they can contact me with a story idea, I may not always I can't get to everything that people approach me with, but if people know that they can contact me and they know that I'm the person to contact, even if that relationship has just been them seeing me on TV or they were at an event and I was there, that's helpful in terms of reporting. And I think it's like I think the trust issue is really important. And I could probably go down a rabbit hole on that, but I do try to, when I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I do sometimes try to establish that I'm actually from Southwest Iowa and I'm not just parachuting in because something crappy is happening in their town, because that's often the perception, and it's not an incorrect perception that we just kind of drop in when there's a crisis in a small town or something bad has happened or there's been a sensational crime, or we have to cover that stuff too. But if I'm out doing positive stories in small towns as well, then people kind of see that I'm there for the long haul. And I don't know if that really answers your question,
I think
Tom.
so. Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
yeah.
but you're right. I mean, I agree with you on the whole. Relationships are important, especially in small town
Well, you
reporting.
also had brought up the positive story aspect too. That yeah, you have to cover the negative, and that's just part of what comes with it. But if you ignore the positive to generate clicks or views or whatever, because we know that the more sensational it is and the more controversy it may cause, the more people are going to click on stories, the more times they're going to watch your videos. That's just the nature of the beast. But you have found a way to still highlight the positive stories that are going on out there. And that was, I think, the biggest reason that I wanted to talk to you today, because it's lacking in a lot of areas, but there's value there. There's real value there. And you're doing a wonderful job getting that information out.
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I do think it's important. I mean, anchor, our evening anchor, Mary Nelson, has a series called Positively the Heartland. And I know that she thinks it's important to highlight people's humanity too. And you don't want to turn on the news and just see negative stuff all the time. And you're right, some of the controversial things do get a lot of clicks, but sometimes the really heartwarming or inspiring stories get a lot of clicks too. I mean, my recent higher performing story was the World War II airman whose remains were finally brought home to Glenwood after he was identified, 80 years after he was killed over what's now Poland. And I mean, it's not entirely, obviously there's a tragedy to that story, right? But there's also a positive.
Yeah.
I would consider that a positive story because it's like a hero gets to come home and he's being honored, and family has answers, and that sort of thing. And that got I mean, that did really well online because I think it has a lot of the elements that people do want from a positive story. And I think people are hungry for positive stories and for connection right now, which is also the thing about telling positive stories in places where maybe people don't always see stories, is we have to start humanizing each other a little bit more and talking to each other
Yeah.
across that urban rural divide that you kind of alluded to as well. I don't know if it's as stark here in the Omaha metro area where a lot of people commute to the cities but live in small towns or vice versa, but that is a divide I think that exists in our society. And so I think highlighting the positive stories from different neighborhoods like we're trying to do, like I think that does matter.
How long did it take for you had said that people contact you now with different stories and different things that are going on. How long did it take from the time that you started and went on air in the role that you're in now before those started to come in? Did you have to go out and establish yourself first, or did it just happen right away?
No, it didn't happen right away, and it maybe happened a little faster for me because sort of repeatedly saying that I was covering Southwest Iowa, I think that clicked with people. I mean, I grew up in Southwest Iowa, obviously. So I understand that that is a corner of the state of Iowa that historically has been kind of fallen through the cracks. I think when it comes to media, like maybe not as much attention from Des Moines and Omaha, maybe focused more on Nebraska, even though it's in the Omaha media market. And so I think it was easy for people to sort of recognize that I was reporting on Southwest Iowa and start coming to me with story ideas. But it does take time to build, I guess, that reputation, or to build awareness among people. And I'm out there, I'm naturally an introvert, but I play an extrovert on TV, I guess. But when I'm out reporting, I do try to pass out my business card as much as possible because you just don't know
Mhm.
when someone is going to have an idea. And it could be anybody. It could be anybody that says, "Hey, my neighbor's doing this thing," or "There's this event happening at my kid's school," or "Did you know that this issue is being discussed in front of the city council in my tiny town and it's kind of strange, and, do you have time to look into it?" Whatever. But that definitely took time for me to start. And it really probably took a year for me to even start being recognized a little bit when I'm out in the community. But I would say it took 6 months of scraping a lot more and working harder on finding stories before those stories started coming to me. And I still have days that are just kind of dry, right? You can't,
Oh, sure.
not everything is, not everything is easy, or not everything fits into your schedule, which is the other thing. Is I have a notebook full of ideas, but the time to get to some of those stories is sometimes difficult too.
Right. And I've gotten, I know more about things that are actually close to home now than I did before by doing this. Last month I did an episode on Hitchcock House over by Lewis. I didn't even know anything about it. I didn't know that we had something with such deep history into the Underground Railroad just down the road
Yeah.
from where I'm at. And it was fascinating, the history behind it. And there's a lot of those things around there. And that came to me. That wasn't something that I sought out. So yeah, it's encouraging to watch people feed into this and desire this type of coverage. They want to tell their stories. And you and I are we do things a little bit differently because you have to condense everything down into what, about 2 minutes at the max, where
Yeah.
where I can
And
just go
talking
however
to
long I
me,
want. Yeah.
I was going to say, in talking to me, you can probably tell how hard that is for me to condense stuff to 2 minutes. I like to get into the details. That's also frustrating. Another question. But yes, yeah, the Hitchcock house I know about, but I've never been there, and it is just down the road.
Right.
And the other one is there's an Underground Railroad location in Tabor as well. And I've never done any stories on either of those places. And it's such an important part of Iowa history that people need to understand. I think so I'm glad that you did that. And yeah, you're right. People are hungry. I think people are hungry to tell their stories and to hear stories they've never heard before. And probably our job as local media, whether it's what you're doing or what I'm doing, is every once in a while you have to localize a national news story, or at least I have to localize a national news story. But I often, when I do those stories, I do have to kind of think, well, is this being covered ad nauseum everywhere else? Like, why do I have to do this? Is it better for me to go somewhere and tell a story that nobody else is telling? And most of the time, it's probably better for me to tell the story that nobody else is telling because we're all consuming probably more national news than we even should be. And so,
I'm not,
like,
yeah, I'm not even convinced it's all news.
well, it's not. It's not. A lot of it's like manufactured controversy or it's just opinion and I could go down a rabbit hole on that in terms of like what that does with partisanship and negative partisanship and the perception of us versus them, which I think again ties back to why it's the positive storytelling is important. And I do think a lot about the urban rural divide because I've had a foot in both worlds for my whole life. So to me, it kind of made sense. Like I was doing 4-H in Glenwood and I was going hunting with my dad in Mills County. And my grandfathers had been farmers. And yet I was also coming to Omaha to do theater as a little kid. And those two worlds didn't overlap very much, if at all. And I've always been like that, living in New York City, but still having ties to Iowa or living in Iowa or in Iowa and Nebraska and still having ties to these big cities. And most of us are a lot more alike than we are different. So it's how do you bridge those gaps? But I mean, I know people in Omaha that don't have any experience with rural America and they're 20 minutes away from rural America. But vice versa, like people that are afraid to come into the city. like we and so I think it's important. I think it's important that we have a reporter who is not just telling the hard news stories, but also telling positive human stories from North Omaha, and which is a community that historically in Omaha has been ignored a lot, unless there's something bad
Yeah,
happening.
that's very true. Yeah.
Right, right. So hearing those positive stories, like that's good for all of Omaha, right? And the same thing, it's easy to parachute into even Glenwood, which isn't that far away. It's easy to parachute into Glenwood when there's a horrific double homicide, as there was in August. But there's a lot of like really cool, fun, sweet things happening in that community too. I'll be honest, I was surprised to see that the only colleagues I had when the World War II airman was brought home, it was the newspapers were there, which was not a surprise. The local newspapers were there and the Nonpareil covered it, but I didn't see any other TV stations, and that actually surprised me. And um I'm not trying to disparage them, but it just emphasized to me like we're all spread so thin and at least somebody was there, and at least the local newspapers still exist to be there to cover it. So I don't know where I was going with that because I go down so many rabbit holes.
Well, listen,
I went on a tangent.
you brought it up that you and I your television background, I'm radio, but there's some similarities with what has happened, and one of the similarities is how far cutbacks and budget cuts have taken staff that you don't have. When you go out, you're taking your own camera. You used to go out with a team. I mean, that used to be how it was done. I used to work in a building full of people, whether it be sales or whether it be sports or news or all of the different categories. And now everybody's just cut down so tight. And there's a number of different reasons that you can point at. But ultimately, what it comes down to is we're all wearing a lot of hats now. And it's a it's a different type of deal than it was, say, even 20 years ago.
Yeah. And just so people don't, and we saw it coming 20 years ago because I was trained to do everything. There was no assumption that I was going to have a photographer, camera person with me even 20 years ago. So, but people are surprised when I show up in the field and it's just me and I'm, 5 feet tall and 50 years old and I'm dragging all my camera equipment with me. And the the thing about it that I discussed this with some newspaper people the other day too, because they've been slashed more than anybody in
Yes, they
terms,
have.
and it's not good. And this is what matters to community. This is not just, you and me complaining about how we have to wear too many hats and our jobs are harder. It's so folks know it is not good for democracy if you have fewer local reporters on the beat, keeping their eye on local government, local business, whatever it is, it actually isn't good for. There's studies now that if a local newspaper goes away, a small town newspaper goes away, local corruption goes up, voter participation goes down. We know that even the reduction in size of a news staff, I don't have data on this, but there is no way things aren't slipping through the cracks because we don't have the capacity to do it as an industry anymore. And I hate to, bring this down to a place that isn't positive, but we do see this place where I think, a lot of newspapers are. There was a woman that was interviewed recently on NPR that was working for the Roanoke, Virginia newspaper. When she started in 1989, there were something like 60 people on that staff, and now they're down to 6.
Wow.
So there, yeah. So there's no way with all the things that are happening, school districts, local government, local business, nonprofits, whatever, there's no way that stuff isn't getting missed, positive and negative. The investigative stories still need to be told, but also the positive stories. And the newspaper, at least, Glenwood still has local reporters there on their weekly newspaper. And that at least used to be when I was growing up, that was a thing that tied the community together in a lot of ways. Everybody was getting the same information, so you could have the same conversations. You might have different opinions about it or different thoughts about it, or thoughts about, because this was the thing 40 years ago. Well, why is the wrestling team on the front page when they were state champions, but the speech team
Yep.
only gets an insert in the inside part when they were state champions? Literal conversation that I remember from the 80s. Like you can have those conversations, but everybody's having the same conversation. And that's just not true anymore. And that's back to your point too about national media not even all being news. So
Well, and we don't have a ton of time left, but
sorry
what
about that.
what I have found is that the need that existed then for that type of coverage and for that type of service exists today. The need hasn't left, but the service has. And I think a lot of that has to do with cutbacks. And I think that, I can say things that you probably can't. And so I'll just say them that corporations who purchase media outlets in areas that they don't live don't really have a good understanding about how to do media in that area because it's different. You know, I'm sure that you could say and point out that Omaha is different than Los Angeles and needs to be reported on in a different way. You can't throw a blanket over it, but corporations owning so many different media outlets, that's what's happened. And they're, in order to condense things, in order to try to save money on salaries or what have you, they can't uh, they can't tailor everything for a specific market because they have to do things all in one direction and as I mentioned, throw a blanket over it. And it doesn't work. Hasn't
Mhm.
forever. That's why you see so many people get laid off because the advertising leaves and they can't afford to pay them anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely truth to that. I will say, I think that's one of the nice things that scripts going to this neighborhood news model is the idea you have a reporter embedded in part of your viewing area and they know that area
Right.
really well. So there's somebody still, advocating. We've got multiple Iowa people in our newsroom actually. So there's still people advocating for Iowa stories in our newsroom because and we're not just here for that's the other thing is like people used to come to a market and they'd stay, but the way the industry is structured, we'd have, a young reporter will come in and they'll be in Omaha for 2 years and then they'll move on to a bigger market because that's them moving up the ladder, and so there are fewer people that just kind of move here and settle here and stay or come back home. And so it's the advantage of getting some reporters too that are from the area that have ties to that area that can advocate for it. And we do still get, and I there's nothing that you said that I disagree with, but we do still get quite a bit of editorial say. We may not get a say in how much staffing we have, um, but most decisions are made for us. They're still made locally. But again, it is different that KMA and KMTV, as an example, were both owned by the May family.
Right.
And so you had local owners for all of these TV stations, and there has been a lot of consolidation over the years, and not all corporate owners of all local TV stations are the same. And I do feel relatively good about Scripps and their ethics and their goals, and I like the neighborhood news model, but you're right. This consolidation is a problem, and I think it's just about killed newspapers even more so than
Yeah.
anything.
And well, and from my vantage point and from what I have seen, the most successful radio stations on a small market level are owned
Mm.
by individuals still. And it's not widespread. Most of
No.
them are owned by corporations, but there's a pockets here and there. And KMA is still owned locally down in Southwest Iowa. And I know the Atlantic Group. They have a few stations, but they're not national.
Right.
Are pockets here and there, and they can tailor their programming and also their sales approach to be able to focus on what's going on there locally, and they're successful doing it. The medium is still needed and still wanted. It's just corporations are had, don't know
Yeah.
how to do things and don't know how to tailor things, and with obvious exceptions, but still, that's my little soapbox speech.
No, that's okay. I mean, I know that radio has changed a lot
Yeah,
too, and you'll get, we listen to the radio and that there's someone that's DJing. I don't even know. The on-air personality is clearly not in your hometown. And they
exactly.
don't, and they're in Chicago or New York or somewhere else random. And you see that a little bit with TV sometimes too. That's not so much the case in Omaha, not yet, but um yeah, I mean, and then it just people don't watch because it's not actually local. So there are those of us out there trying to do it with traditional media, but I also think to address what you're doing, Todd, I think like as journalists or media personalities, content creators, it's like anything, the formats have changed, the landscape of media has changed. It's a lot more disparate because of social media and so on and so on. So you're seeing a lot of people be entrepreneurial. There's so many people popping up with podcasts, including folks. I always look for someone like you that's a professional still that knows how to do it. It's not just some random guy with a podcast, right? It's someone with a background
Right.
in storytelling. And so I think actually that is a hopeful sign that there will be people, and these nonprofit models too for print media, the new nonprofits that have popped up to keep whether it's local government accountable or tell stories that aren't being told. I think all of that. I know our time is clicking down, but I think some of it is just that we're in this kind of flex point and things are changing and we don't know how it's going to shake out, and there probably will be more people doing like what you're doing and fewer people doing what I'm doing.
Well, we're going to call that a teaser and a cliffhanger into the next time I get you on the show, because that's yeah, that's a whole hour at least of a conversation. But very grateful, not just for your time today, Katrina, but also for what it is that you're doing. And I look at you and the service that you are providing for Southwest Iowa and for the Omaha area as well. This is what media used to be and what media still should be. And you're doing a wonderful job. And I'm grateful that you're out there, and we've got folks like you on the air.
Well, thanks. And yeah, we're doing the best that we can to get folks that are actually tied, if not to Omaha and Council Bluffs, then tied to the region. And because you're right, that does make a difference.
Last Friday on Morning Coffee, did you catch it? We had Travis Waldstein. Travis gave a great update of what's going on in the trades here in our area, stuff that's happening at Iowa Western, and what he's very, very encouraged about. I encourage you to go and watch that program if you haven't seen it yet. And also, if you have a leak, a clogged drain, or if you're even planning a big remodel, Waldstein Plumbing in Council Bluffs has you covered. Fast, reliable service, expert craftsmanship, handling everything from small repairs to major installations. Visit them online at waldsteinplumbing.com. And Service Master Restore by Schmader knows it can be hard to get back to normal when you've suffered serious property damage due to flooding, fire, or smoke, and you may also be left with all sorts of questions about how to get your home or business back to normal. Service Master Restore by Schmader will restore your space by offering quality commercial and residential restoration services in Council Bluffs and the surrounding area. That's Service Master Restore by Schmader. Again, thank you very much, Katrina Markel from Channel 3, for being our guest today. We have a fun week planned, and I'm looking forward to diving in. My name's Todd Studer. Have a great Monday.